I am live. Hi, it's Gordon Causey, and you are watching Act One, a Canadian take on news events. Pardon me if my voice is a little bit on the scratchy side. I've probably been drinking too much coffee, not hydrating enough. Thank you for the one thumb up that I have already. If you enjoy my content, if you like it, I appreciate those who hit the thumb up button. That helps the algorithms, helps promote my content. And likewise, of course, you're welcome to subscribe, share, all the things. If you're coming on to the live chat, as Danny has, wishing me a good evening. I already know that Danny is from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. But if you're coming on to the live chat, if you wouldn't mind putting that up there, I've been told, I've heard that when place names are put down, that again, that's something that helps the algorithms, that helps boost the exposure that a channel receives. So whether you're watching live like Danny is right now, or if you're watching later, you can put that into the comment field down below. I don't think you can comment on a live stream while it is live. I think you have to, that's only if you're watching on replay. If you're watching live, you can put it into the chat box, uh, as Danny has done. And he's got the praying hands, the cross, and like me, coffee. Current mood? Nope. Got this as I think a Christmas present, Christmas birthday, whatever. But the topic is clear in the thumbnail, going to be talking about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And thank you, Danny. Danny's put down Montreal. He didn't put the accent aigu. And when you write Montreal in French, the E, Montee, E accent aigu. In French, you say Montreal, whatever. Going to be talking about Charlie Kirk and the conspiracy theories that are already starting to percolate. That may not even be the best word, percolate. It seems the conspiracy theories may just be rampant out there. And Denny writes, that's because he's a maudit anglais, a maudit anglophone. A darned, or maudit in French means damned, as in damned means your soul is cast into eternal torment. And it's a common word used in French for les anglophones, les maudits anglophones, damned English. Eat Me, Nancy is here as well. I know Nancy has been talking about coming on to the live stream. Won't be possible to do it tonight because I'm not on StreamYard. I'm doing this on the regular YouTube platform. But Eat Me is Francophone. Danny's Anglophone, but both of them speak both English and French pretty much perfectly. And I have to remind myself that Nancy is first English. English is her first language. Or rather, sorry, Nancy's first language is French. So sometimes when she frames something in English, I have to remember how it would be framed in French. And it means no issues tonight. She has some chicken on the stove. Very good. But let's break it down. We have what will be what I'm going to call the mainstream, the narrative. This is the narrative that seems to be is in the mainstream. This is what happened. And it's widely held now that a lone gunman on top of a rooftop with a clear line of sight to a bowl type amphitheater area where this event was being held at the University Valley of Utah, I think that UVU, that the shooter had a clear line of sight from about in and around 200 yards, and he was seen. There are videos circulating now that showed him, people showing, Nancy shared one of these with me from a Twitter account that show someone lying in profile. I've seen another one where they're again showing this guy lying in if you're on a firing range, they call it the prone position, where you're lying flat on your chest, you're down, and it is the most, if you're going to be taking an aimed shot, if you're going to be aiming in on a specific target, the prone position is the best position to be in. When you're in the seated position, when you're in the kneeling position, when you're in the standing position, what happens is, if you're holding a rifle, the rifle will cant. It will move up and down as you're breathing. And I am no marksman. I have been on the firing range. Danny and me know, others know. I've spoken about it on my station before. I am ex-military, Canadian Armed Forces. However, I was in the communications branch, SIGs, signals. Uh, I would work in command posts. I would work at radar stations, things of that nature. I was posted for a time to a ambulance unit, a field ambulance unit in Valcartier, Quebec, and I would be in the command post. The poste de commandement is what it was called when I was in Valcartier. Le PC au lieu de le CP, whatever. So I was never an expert shot. And I was never going to be deemed a marksman. Uh, but I did take training in how to operate, the Canadian Armed Force rifle, C7, and, about canting, the canting of the rifle, and, just before you're going to breathe, you take a deep breath, and then very calmly, even pressure, squeeze. And so this is the mainstream narrative, is that an individual lying prone on a rooftop to about 200 yards away with a clear line of sight to the little tent enclosure where Charlie Kirk was sitting with his entourage around and in behind him. And that then the loud crack of the rifle. And then, of course, we saw the aftermath. There are all kinds of videos circulating out there. Danny shared with me one that is quite close up, and what you see is a very large quantity of blood. It's, if you're weak of stomach, it's not something you're going to want to watch. And I have watched it a couple times, more than two. Uh, Whale Oil is here. He's doing the two times thing. Danny is asking, when we spoke, I had said it was a high powered rifle. And he was right. Yeah, Danny and I talked just in the immediate aftermath when I was still processing everything. The full gravity of the situation hadn't even hit me when we were speaking. And Danny has hunted. And he said that his suspicion was that it was a hunting rifle. He came to that opinion based on the sound of the crack. He knows more about guns than I do, more about firearms and rifles than I do. And he was right. They're calling it a Mauser bolt action rifle. Apparently, iterations of this have been around since World War II. They're from 200 yards. They're incredibly accurate. The mainstream narrative being promulgated right now is that you would not need to be an expert, that after simply a few hours of training on use and operation and how to aim and shoot, that you could easily hit a target at 200 yards. And I do know that lying in the prone position, you're going to, even me, and I'm not a good shot. I was never a good shot. Even me, well, I'd have a tight group, what they call a tight grouping, where you put 5 shots and you want them as tight as possible. Even poor aim like me, I'd have a very tight grouping lying in the prone position. And I'm just trying to catch up on what's being written here. Whale's doing the 2 times speed thing to catch up with the live. Shouldn't take you too long because we're not far in. Eat Me is writing that what has been seen cannot be unseen. Do not watch the videos of Charlie's passing. Well, that's the mainstream story so far, and there's more to it. They say that they have recovered the weapon This Mauser is what they are saying was the weapon. They said that it has been matched to whatever went into Charlie. They are saying that they found at the site when they recovered the rifle. I believe they said on the magazines that there were pro-trans ideology type messaging written on the magazines and maybe even on the actual ammo itself. Like there was more ammo there than, and apparently there was messaging written on it that was pro-trans, pro-Antifa, however you pronounce that. It's supposed to mean anti-fascist, and that's a common. The Antifa crowd is very left-wing, and it seems like they believe in fighting fire with fire. The way they want to fight what they perceive to be fascism is they fight it with fascist machinations. I back, I'm trying to think, I think it was 2019, 2020. Dave Rubin, who's a right-wing political commentator, came to Hamilton, Ontario. I believe it was Mohawk College. He was doing an event with Maxime Bernier, leader of Canada's People's Party of Canada. And the Antifa crowd was out there. And this is before COVID, and they were wearing balaclavas, they were covering their faces, and they were screaming at individuals going to watch this event. Again, David Rubin talking to Maxime Bernier, and they were screaming Nazi scum off our street. And they were intimidating. And there was one video that went quite viral of an elderly couple. It was actually an elderly man, probably in his 60s, trying to get his mother across the street, and his mother 80s, 90s, and they're trying to go see this event. And they were physically intimidated by two young thugs with balaclavas, and they were screaming in their faces, Nazi scum off our streets. And what's, the irony is unbelievable. David Rubin is, number one, he's Jewish. And number two, he's a homosexual. He's married. He's gay, and he's married to a guy. And so trying, people trying to denounce, they're trying to denounce David Rubin as a Nazi, and he's Jewish and gay. And I swear, some members of the extreme left, a lot of members of the extreme left, are so brain dead that they don't even recognize the irony of, referring to a guy like David Rubin, a gay Jewish man, being a Nazi. But that's when you get to the extremes, either on the extreme right or on the extreme left. When you get out into the extremes, you're dealing with people who are, it's a bit of a trite expression, but they're more than a few French fries short of a Happy Meal. They're dumber than a second coat of paint, and that's on both sides when you get to the extremes. Anyway, and Danny is agreeing with Nancy's exhortation to not watch the videos of Charlie's passing. Danny, thank you. Danny is reminding me not to be on top, but to be rather on live chat, because sometimes YouTube will filter out some of the messages for whatever reason. And as Danny knows, everyone else, I like to see everything. Danny's writing, funny how Antifa means anti-fascist, and yet they act like fascists, and that's what they do. And I think it's the old rhetoric of they think they're fighting fire with fire. And I like to always default back to that old line of the Mahatma Gandhi, famous peaceful activist in India who brought about India's separation, their independence from Great Britain. He famously said, when you fight fire with fire, all you end up with is more fire. And I have a fear. I have a conspiratorial mind. I do not believe that Building 7 on 9/11, that it just went down perfectly. And incidentally, here we are in the waning moments of September 11th, 2025. So we're on, I guess, the 24th year anniversary of that event, the 9/11, which I, experienced firsthand. I was working in downtown Toronto for a tech firm at the time. So, 9/11 is right in my wheelhouse. When I talk about John F. Kennedy, I wasn't even alive. If I talk about Martin Luther King being shot, I was like 2 years of age. Same with Robert Kennedy. If you're looking at the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, that would have been in around 1980, 81. I was a teenager. And then, of course, we had this summer's most recent assassination attempt on Donald J. Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. And conspiracy theories are the norm. I don't even think I mentioned there's also the assassination of RFK Jr. And I always say that. I've gotten so used to saying RFK Jr., no, not the assassination of RFK Jr., the assassination, the actual killing of RFK, Robert Kennedy, sometimes called Bobby Kennedy, who was, at the time of his killing, he was the leading candidate for the 1968 run to the presidency. He was going to win the Democratic nomination, and he was going to be the nominee for the Democratic Party, and it would have been him running against Richard Nixon, but he was taken out. Lyndon Johnson completed John F. Kennedy's term in office and then ran for election in 1964, won, but then decided not to run in 1968. And Bobby Kennedy was the leading candidate to replace him until, in a California hotel, he was shot and killed by a guy named Sirhan. And again, that's the official story. RFK Jr. does not believe that he does not believe it was Sirhan. You can watch him being interviewed on this. He thinks someone else took his father out. But anyway, we'll get into all this. I want to talk a little bit more about the prescribed, the narrative. So that's pretty much it. So we have the presentation is that whoever did this to Charlie Kirk, that they did it from that rooftop, that they have given away the fact that they are transgender, gender confusion, and I think there were some other markings on there on the anti-MAGA, this kind of thing. So we have this presentation of a gunman who was very much a left-wing nut job, acting alone, and he managed to escape. He climbed down off the roof or jumped down off the roof, deposited the gun and his paraphernalia, these magazines and additional ammo, dropped it and wrapped in a towel or something in a wooded area, and then likely just blended in with the crowd and was able to escape. That's the mainstream narrative. And is that the truth? Immediately in the wake of, when I did my live video of yesterday, just a few hours after it had happened, there were all kinds of reports flying around. They fought the guy. He's an old white-haired gentleman who's down on his knees. I saw one report saying that he was saying, "I'd do it again." And then I saw further video, and it might be the same guy, a white-haired older gentleman down on his knees, and he's saying, shoot me now, or shoot me. And you've got general confusion going on. There's stories that there were people in the immediate area in front of Charlie Kirk. Someone apparently had a pellet gun, all kinds of stories floating out there. And you have a mass event with confusion is reigning supreme, and you have someone seemingly claiming responsibility who had nothing to do with it. Apparently he was held and then released. The messages are now starting to come fast and furious. So let me catch up on what's being said before we get in. So, that's the mainstream narrative. That's what we're being told happened. And then I want to get into some of the conspiracy theories that are floating around, because I genuinely think there may very well be some merit to them. I was watching Timcast, and he was, invoking Occam's razor, that, the most likely hypothesis is probably the correct one. I don't know, because the way that media can package things and present them, they can make things look as the most plausible, but are they? And and employing Occam's razor can discourage people from thinking critically and trying to question, which is a hallmark of a functioning democracy, the ability to question a narrative. If you can't question things, we all just went through the COVID era. You weren't allowed to question the safety and the efficacy of the you know what's, etc., or the safety and the wisdom of locking everyone down. You weren't allowed to question it. Questioning is vital. Anyway, just going to read up on the messages before I get into the conspiracies, and I want to hear yours if you have some others beyond what I'm hearing. We have Eat Me writing that the Antifa movement is obviously paid by higher ups with a lot of cash. Well, it's a lot of talk that George Soros famously, has funded when they had all these campus protests happening at Columbia and other prominent U.S. colleges and universities, that they all had the same tents, and apparently a lot of this financing was coming from George Soros. And you almost wonder, can these things, do they happen organically, or are there puppet masters behind the scenes pulling people's strings? Danny loves Dave Rubin. I enjoy his commentary. He's one of the voices that I listen to. Although, and I say this often, when I see high production values, when I see individuals, be it a David Rubin, a Tucker Carlson, on the other side of the spectrum, the Young Turks, and these stations with massively high production values, very, it's like watching a nightly newscast or a current affairs program on a major network. I often wonder, are they dancing to someone's tune? Because, and that's why when you come on my station, there are no ads. I'm not sponsored by anyone. Yeah, I am monetized to the extent that some annoying little ads come up that I have no say on. And the way I look at it is, if YouTube, because I put out content and it generates some views, well, then YouTube uses that to generate revenue. So if a few nickels, dimes, and quarters slip through the cracks and fall into my hand, fair enough. But I have no connection to any of the ads you see, and you're not going to hear me saying, but let me take a second and talk about today's sponsor. A lot of people are worried about the value of their money now and protecting it. Well, if you're going to want to hedge against inflation, buy gold, and the best place to buy gold is through whoever. You're not going to hear that on this station. Danny is writing, the irony is that when Charlie Kirk was shot, he was speaking about mass shootings done by trans people. Yeah. Uh, the guy had asked him if he knew how many shootings in the past year, or how many shootings there had been over the past several years, I don't know, involving trans people, and Kirk picked up the mic and said, too many, and then put the mic down. This was Charlie Kirk's kind of shtick. Basically, he'd sit there in his chair. Individuals would go up to a microphone, they'd start to challenge, debate Charlie Kirk, kind of, prove me wrong type of thing. And he'd have a table with a bottle of water. He was always drinking his water, like every question he would answer, put down the mic, take a sip of water. And so he asked him, how many shootings have involved trans individuals, and too many. And then the guy was asking him how many shootings in total there had been, in the United States in the past year or 5 years or whatever. And then he picked up the microphone and said, are we including gang violence as well? Put the mic down. And then the guy was going on and talking about the fact that there had been 5 shootings involving trans individuals in the last year or two or three or whatever, and that's when the supposed what's being presented as the unfortunate term kill shot was fired. Um, so anyway, uh, Danny's writing, I saw a video that claimed that it was all planned and it was faked. I'm sorry, not with that amount of blood. I may have seen that same video or one like it, and get right into that. But first, uh, Nancy is writing, not only that, someone behind him was doing signs like a baseball coach would give, just waiting for that wording of trans. Uh, you know, and I'm going to start talking about that. I'm not going to share the videos because they're out there and everyone watching this, can find them easily and probably has already seen them. Darnell Pistachio has shown up and said, he's writing, people who think it's fake think it's Israel, think it was anybody but the very people celebrating online. And then Daniel's of the opinion, Darnell Pistachio is of the opinion that anyone thinking along those lines, that they're out of their minds. Got to remember what Jack Black, Furious D, after Trump was assassinated, he made a comment about don't miss, or I forget exactly what he said uh, on stage during a musical performance. And there are a lot of people out there who didn't like Charlie Kirk, who didn't like what he had to say, who disagreed vehemently with his characterization of gender confused individuals. But uh, anyway, Amy is writing with respect to the signalers, individuals who some are interpreting that signals were being made. One was wearing a white shirt with a white ball cap and sunglasses, and there was another guy in a black. He was wearing a black shirt like mine, same color. Might have been a golf shirt or something. I don't know. Um, Annie's writing, it wasn't him. The FBI have pictures of the guy they're looking for. He is a young guy. Yeah, they have a picture of the guy that they purport was up on the roof and scurried away. And they have pictures. Unfortunately, the guy's wearing, I believe, a baseball cap and sunglasses. And I looked at the picture and I said, my gosh, I probably could name 5, 6, 7 individuals who broadly fit that description that kind of look like that guy. I know guys who, if they put on a black or a dark baseball cap and dark sunglasses, that look like that. So anyway, and then Danny's saying that the manhunt is on. That's obvious. He's saying also that there's $100,000 being offered for information that leads to an arrest. Whale, who's probably caught up now, he says, I see that RFB, Richie from Boston, released a 2-hour documentary on 911 whistleblowers examined, but he's yet to watch it. Okay. Darnell or Eat Me is saying to Darnell, we try to keep an open mind here. Don't go say we are subhuman if we question the official narrative. And I will echo Nancy's sentiment there, Darnell. That is this idea of gaslighting. Oh, you're crazy to question. And we lived through this through the COVID era. And let's not repeat the mistake of, just gaslighting anyone who has the temerity to question, oh, you must be crazy. It's exactly as it's being presented. COVID came from a bat that in a wet market in Wuhan, China. What are you, one of those nut jobs who thinks it was in a lab, in a secretive bio lab with Boris and Natasha? Oh, you're one of those. This is what we had to endure. Let's not do that to each other now. Question things. Anyway, and I'm going to get into things. It's hard to do the live chat and stream of consciousness, but I'm going to try. Darnell is writing, have you heard of these Twitter or Blue Sky accounts? And he's saying that he's heard of at least 3 that are saying there's going to that they're going to do something really funny or evaporate him. No, I have not. And then Darnell's writing, sorry, I was agreeing with Danny and then replying to you separately. He's not meaning to, and I'm going to use the SH word. So forewarned is forearmed. I won't be dropping any F bombs, but shit is hardly a gross profanity. And Darnell is saying that he didn't mean to shit on anyone. And he's fair enough. Okay, so swords have been sheathed. Very good. Uh, and don't worry. Uh, and then we have Darnell saying that the liberal hive mind has exposed one of the Twitter Blue Sky accounts in a recent video. And Whale Oil is writing, generally, in my experience, provocateurs wearing red trim outfits are involved in these Charlie Kirk type thingies. But he's saying, I don't know. And a lot of us are like that. And then Eat Me saying that it wasn't Jack Black, it was his musical partner. Right, Furious D. I don't know the name of his musical partner. And that Jack Black then disassociated himself right after his partner with Tenacious D uttered those words. But let's unpack this a little bit. It strikes me as odd that I don't know if there's been a history of, did Lee Harvey Oswald, when they found, I think it was an Italian-made bolt action rifle that he had, did he write on the magazines? Had he written on the bullets? I don't think John Wilkes Booth did that when he took out Abraham Lincoln, or I don't think Sirhan did it, or James Earl Ray when he shot MLK. I don't think John Hinkley Jr. This seems to be a relatively new thing where individuals are marking the weapons or the magazines or the actual ammunition itself and betraying a political ideology. But now it seems to be almost an expectation that there's going to be something written on the firearm. Now, I do know that in World War II, and probably World War I as well, but certainly in World War II, when bombers were being loaded up with ordnance to be dropped in Dresden or in Germany or wherever, that they were writing, "This is for you, Adolf," and different messaging would be put on the ordnance. But that's in a war. That's where you have time to, obviously, if you're putting it on a bomb that's going onto whatever type of bomber, Lancaster bomber that would be flying over, there's not going to be anything surviving. And it reminds me somewhat of after 9/11 happened. And we can talk about 9/11 specifically. We'll remember that by some miracle, if you believe the mainstream narrative about hijackers and flying into planes and all that, that one of the hijackers, Muhammad Atta or something like that, that his passport somehow miraculously survived and was found 2 or 3 blocks away, had survived this fireball and, was found. And likewise, a copy of the Quran. And then later, there were letters that were being sent to the US Congress as they were coming up to a vote on something called the US Patriot Act. There was an act making its way through Congress, through the House and through the Senate, and would later go to George W. Bush to sign. And it was called the Patriot Act. And that's just a fancy name for the Surveillance Act. It increased the surveillance capabilities and the legal framework to allow agencies like Homeland Security, which was to be created out of the Patriot Act, and the FBI, to spy on and surveil the American population. So while this incredibly thick piece of legislation, it was like a phone book, while this legislation was being debated, all of a sudden the Congress in the US started to receive letters that were laced with anthrax, deadly anthrax. And as I believe that at least a couple congresspersons, congressmen or congresswomen, at least a couple of people died as a result of exposure to anthrax. And the letters were written death to America, Arabic symbols, references, Ali Akbar, praise be to Allah, stuff like that. And it was obvious that whoever was sending the letters was either they were either an Islamic extremist, or conversely, that they certainly wanted it to appear that whoever was sending the letters was an Islamic extremist. It was later determined, and this is the biggest problem, what do you believe and what don't you believe? But the story that came out was that the anthrax anthrax apparently has a genetic signature, and they were able to trace the origin of the anthrax to a US military base. And the whole question of inside jobs starts screaming at you. So the fact that they, in this event, Charlie Kirk shooting, that they find the weapon and they find magazines and ammunition and they find writings on it, I find it problematic. I find it difficult. But gonna read and then likewise, that guy who we've all probably seen the video now of the guy down on his knees, and he's saying, "Take me out, shoot me, shoot me. You got me, shoot me." And you have to wonder, is he a distraction? Is he a patsy, a fall guy? Was he, in on it, so to speak? Because we're always told these are lone gunmen. Going back to RFK, or rather JFK, and Daly Square in Dallas, Texas. The official narrative coming out of the Warren Commission was that Lee Harvey Oswald was acting alone. I personally do not believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was acting alone. As a matter of fact, I tend to agree with one of the last things he said, probably the last thing he said publicly, was as he was being dragged through that Dallas police station. He turned to the cameras. The reporters are asking him, "Did you kill the president?" He said, I've been denied representation, which is my constitutional right. And they're asking him questions. And then he turned to them and he said, "I'm just the patsy. I'm the fall guy. I'm the guy I'm part of it." If you call yourself the patsy, you're saying you are part of a conspiracy, but the patsy never knows he's the patsy until everything's done. And it's like, oh crap, I'm the one who's going to take the fall for it. And he said to the world, "I'm just the patsy." Anyway. Ublix is asking, what conspiracy are we going through right now? Well, we haven't gotten to them yet. We've gotten to this idea that it might have been a conspiracy, that it wasn't just a lone lunatic gunman. As so often happens, JFK, Lee Harvey Oswald acting on his own. Bobby Kennedy, Sirhan acting on his own. Ronald Reagan, John Hinkley Jr. acting on his own. The shooting in Butler, Pennsylvania, President Trump through the air. Oh, it was just a young, confused, incel young man acting alone. Always some guy just acting alone. And it strikes me that it's a reasonable question to ask, was this a coordinated event? Were there other players involved? Guy there with a pellet gun in the immediate area in front of Charlie Kirk. Was that designed to create confusion so that the main perpetrator could get away? I don't know. But Nancy Eat Me, who goes by Eat Me on here, has already brought one up. And there is one conspiracy theory out there. So if it was a conspiracy, if you had, and a conspiracy simply means one or more people sorry, two or more people, two or more people acting in concert to deceive. And if it involves a criminal activity, then you're dealing with criminal conspiracy. So was it just a lone gunman by himself, or did he have others involved with him? If he had others involved with him, it is automatically a conspiracy. Conspiring. Criminal conspiracy is probably the most common criminal charge in our court systems, both in the US and Canada. Two or more people acting in concert to engage in legal activity, criminal conspiracy. And there are some putting it out there that Israel was behind it. It could be Mossad, because there is speculation out there. I actually was not aware of Charlie Kirk's stance on the whole situation between Israel and Hamas and what's going on in the Gaza Strip. I have subsequently found out that Charlie Kirk was a vociferous supporter of Israel, as so many are on the conservative right-wing side. When you get to the left, you get the queers for Palestine, which I find ironic as hell. When radical Islam would throw a homosexual off a building in Gaza, if they got a hold of one, to see queers for Palestine. But there are suggestions that Charlie Kirk's attitudes towards that conflict, that they were evolving, that they were shifting, that he was moving away from being a supporter of Israel. I haven't seen anything myself that would substantiate Charlie Kirk shifting. I saw an interview he did with Ben Shapiro of the Daily Wire, and they were talking about the situation in Gaza and allegations of genocide and everything like that. And I didn't see anything in there that would suggest to me that Charlie Kirk's attitude was changing, but maybe there's something else out there that I haven't seen yet. And this has kind of been a he said, she said type of allegations. Individuals have come out saying, I know a friend of Charlie Kirk, and Charlie Kirk had said to this friend that he was afraid that his life was going to be threatened by Israel because his attitudes on the conflict in Gaza were changing. That's the way I've heard it framed so far. So there's that side. Another potential allegation, conspiracy theory, would be that it was Islamic forces who wanted to see Charlie Kirk taken down because of his vociferous support for Israel. Again, and then I have my own fear based conspiracy theory. But before I get to my own, let's read on. So Danny is writing, it's like their manifesto is written in the weapon. Yeah, I find that odd. And it seems to be a recent development, something that I don't recall ever happening 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. But now it seems almost like the modus operandi for standard operating procedure now for any shooting. You got to, they'll write something on the magazine to tell us what they're about. It just seems odd. So Whale Oil is saying the 9/11 live TV streams were showing a storm of flying, fluttering papers drifting freely down from the New York City downtown streets. Getting back to the miraculous surviving passport. And that's what Darnell says. Yeah, the miraculous passport. My goodness. Danny says it's probably, I think that's it, Fort Detrick or Fort Derrick, U.S. Army installation in Frederick, Maryland, known for its biomedical research and blood biodefense program. Yeah, that's what they call it, biodefense. But you have to wonder about that. And I'm remembering the name Richard Zacks. It's a name that's coming to mind, but I can't remember because what they did is they eventually pinned it on one specific guy, saying that he was responsible for handling that anthrax and that it was his, that he was behind it somehow. And then he mysteriously stopped being among the living and he took himself out. And did he take himself out? Was he taken out? Who knows? Uh, anyway, Eat Me is writing, all that bullets were carved with words is, I hate this word, obfuscation. I hate that word, too many syllables. Clouding things. That's just to cloud the picture. That's just to make things opaque so that you can't see through. Obfuscation. Hate that word. And then she's writing, staged, organized. Makes me think maybe the deep swamp Dems and Republicans are in on it. I'm open to anything at this point. I'm opening to questioning anything and everything. I question everything on 9/11. I certainly question go back to Reagan, 1980, 1981, when he was shot by John Hinkley Jr. Who's John Hinkley Jr.? Who's the guy who shot Ronald Reagan, the sitting, newly elected president of the United States, who just taken the oath of office? Who's this kid, John Hinkley Jr.? Well, as might be expected, he was the son of John Hinkley Sr., who's John Hinkley Sr., president and CEO of Vanderbilt Energy, also one of George H.W. Bush's biggest political backers and a close friend. The Hinkleys and the Bush family were tight. They used to vacation together. The Hinkley boys and the Bush boys were friends. And so John Hinkley Jr., a guy with a filing cabinet full of mental health issues, gets close enough to the sitting president of the United States to put a bullet in him and to paralyze Brady, part of Reagan's cabinet, John Brady, James Brady. And did that get reported in the mainstream? It's all verifiable information. John Hinkley Sr., Vanderbilt Energy, the close family connection between the Bushes and the Hinkley family, and the fact that this kid had mental health issues up the wazoo, and he gets close enough to the sitting president of the United States to put a bullet in him. Reagan, of course, everyone knows, survived. And then you have to ask, there's a question in Latin, and I don't know how to say it in the Latin form, but the question is, who benefits? Whenever a crime is committed, and there's a question as to who's ultimately behind it, who's the puppet master pulling the strings, the question quite often is, who benefits? And who would have been the biggest beneficiary if Ronald Reagan had ceased to be among the land of the living? Well, according to the U.S. Constitution, who takes over? George H.W. Bush, after the son of a close family friend. And the fact that George H.W. Bush used to be head of the CIA, you have to ask these questions. So it's certainly reasonable now, I think, to ask these questions. There's that old bromide of, when there's an emergency, it creates a problem. And what is the solution to the problem? And invoking that solution, who benefits from the solution that's proposed to this problem of rampant gun violence and, ensuring free speech in the United States? But let's read on. Danny's writing that Utah still has the death penalty, and they do, but I've got to catch up because there's been so many messages. So Eat Me is writing that according to Clayton Morris, it seems that Charlie was about to call what is happening overseas a genocide and rethinking his position on Zionism. That would have been a huge blow to, and this is where I said this is according to Clayton Morris, and I don't even know who Clayton Morris is. Maybe he can enlighten me. But did Clayton Morris hear that directly from Charlie Kirk, or did he hear it from someone in Charlie Kirk's inner circle? The way I'm hearing it is that someone heard from someone in Charlie Kirk's inner circle. So, it's getting further and further away from the source. And I don't know the interview on Charlie Kirk's own podcast with Ben Shapiro. I don't know how recent it was, but the impression I have is that it was very recent, like it was within the last few days. So if Charlie Kirk was going to do a 180 on his stance on, supporting Zionism, the right of the uh, Jewish nation state of Israel to exist, if he was going to do a 180 on that, it certainly wasn't, he didn't give any indication during this interview that he conducted. I watched the whole thing with Ben Shapiro. So, anyway, but I know that a lot of people in the world, whenever something bad happens, well, the Jews are behind it. The Jews did it. They control everything. Jews control the world. That's the narrative that we hear. You have the New York Times constantly. They're big, they're big supporters of the so-called two-state solution, and they're big supporters of the Palestinian cause. Well, and but Jews control the narrative. Well, if they do, why don't they shut up the New York Times? Because the New York Times, a major publication in the United States, very liberal, very left-wing, owned by a guy who is at least nominally Jewish. He's got a Jewish last name. I mean, is he, it's a problem with, defining what does it mean to be Jewish? Is it a racial thing? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a religious thing? Hard to nail down specifically. Uh, and this is the speculation, is that if it's true that Charlie Kirk was going to do a 180 degree polar shift from his support for Israel, if he was going to do that, then that would have meant a massive problem potentially for Israel in losing the support of American right-wing conservatives, to have a very influential voice like Charlie Kirk's change on them. So if that's true, yeah, that probably would have meant, but we're dealing with condition upon condition. I've got to find the smoking gun, something definitive where Charlie Kirk actually indicated that he was going to shift, that he was going to do a 180. He just did an interview within the last, 6, 7 days on his own station. Watch it, on Charlie Kirk podcast here on YouTube. He's sitting down. I think they were live together. I just watched it within the last few hours. I think they're sitting there side by side or by video link. I've consumed so much content over the last, day or so. It's hard to remember everything perfectly, but they were talking, and I didn't see any indication that Charlie Kirk was wavering at all on, what he's been saying for I don't know how long. And it's only just recently that I learned that Charlie Kirk was a major supporter of Israel. The content that I consumed of Charlie Kirk's was always centered around what events like the one in Utah, and typically with some guy dressed up like a woman, and Charlie Kirk, debating the whole gender confusion nonsense. And, well, I'm still a woman. Well, what are your chromosomes? Why do my chromosomes matter? That's the stuff that I knew him for. And I was in 100% agreement with him in terms of his stance on Israel. He wasn't one of my voices that I was listening to on it. For that, to get a balanced view, I listened to a guy like Douglas Murray, or on the other side, I'll listen to content put out by the Young Turks, so I get a balance. I would read Haaretz or Times of Israel, Jerusalem Post. Also read Al Jazeera articles, because I want to see, because I know it's a propaganda war. I know that they're both putting out propaganda. So I want to give me all the propaganda. Give me the pro-Israeli propaganda and the pro-Hamas propaganda. Give them both to me and let me weigh through it. And there is rampant propaganda on both sides. And it's, can make it. And I think a default position for a lot of people is to just pick a side and say, okay, I support Hamas. I support the people of Gaza. So everything coming from Israel is propaganda. Nothing they say is good. And everything I'm hearing from the Gaza health authorities, Hamas, is true. And I'm going to believe everything that comes from Hamas is true and everything that comes from Israel is a lie. And likewise in reverse. People say, oh, it's coming, Hamas health officials, that's propaganda put out by a terrorist organization. They totally disregard it. Everything Israel says is 100% true. And the simple fact of the matter is, and to me, there's no debate on it. Does Israel engage in propaganda? Absolutely 100% yes. Does Hamas and their mouthpieces, are they engaging in propaganda? Yes, 100%, absolutely yes. And good luck. Good luck trying to wade through it. But I try the best I can. And Eatme is saying again, he was so influential that if it is true that he was contemplating shifting away from Israel, that it would make huge waves. Yeah, probably so, if it's true. And then Danny's writing that Utah, that they still have the death penalty. Much of the United States do. It's done on a state level. And I heard someone in the Utah political, maybe the governor or a state legislature, I heard someone say that at a press conference, that we still have the death penalty in this state. And from what I understand, the method they employ is firing squad. But before any such thing happens, if they find an individual, that's unfortunate. You see, Crooks, the kid who we're told was the shooter who put the bullet through Donald Trump's ear. Before he could be questioned, he was taken out. And so often I would like to see these individuals caught and interrogated, questioned, investigated. But all too often it seems like John Hinkley Jr., if that guy had been killed, maybe I never would have found out all this interesting family history. Probably would have, but maybe not. Like there's so much we can learn when an individual is apprehended alive. And so my hope is that they find him, and they, like Lee Harvey Oswald was found. He was caught. He was alive. We could have learned so much until Jack Ruby put a bullet in his gut. And it seemed like a setup to me. They've got a guy accused of shooting the president of the United States, obviously had no security involved. I mean, it's 1962, 1963. But come on. It's not like this has been the first political assassination in the United States. 100 years before Abraham Lincoln, there have been others since. So come on. And yet they paraded Lee Harvey Oswald through that police station. It's like, okay, take your shot. Let's get rid of the guy who's saying that he was part of a conspiracy and he was simply the patsy. Let's get rid of him. And then you had Jack Ruby, the owner of a nightclub with reported connections to organized crime. Bang. There, problem solved. He acted alone. It was just Lee Harvey Oswald, all on his lonesome, decided to take down JFK. Anyway, Darnell is saying to copy and paste something. And then Danny's writing that Charlie was also pushing for the traditional family. Yeah, he was huge on, a return to traditional Christian common sense values. There are two genders, male and female, that men should not be ashamed of their masculinity, that getting married, raising a family, that these are virtuous, good things to do, and they help build a nation up. Whereas promoting gender confusion among the youth and promoting a society of do whatever you feel and do whatever you think is right in your own eyes, that this tears a country down, that it tears a society down, that the cultural moorings are basically being ripped out, and everything, the culture of the United States is completely adrift. And you had voices like Charlie Kirk's, trying to anchor it back down in traditional Judeo-Christian values and biblical understanding, biblical reasoning. And we certainly can't have that if you're a left-wing Marxist ideologue for Marxism. Pretty much everyone knows, if you know anything about Karl Marx and the Communist Manifesto, uh, religion, God, a belief in God, that's the opiate or the drug of the masses. It's a drug. And if you can remove a belief in God, then you can remove a belief in if there's no ultimate lawgiver, then there's no law. Do whatever you can. There's no, moral relativism. Well, it depends on the situation. Depends on how I feel. If I feel justified in doing it, it is justified. Anyway, and then Eat Me is saying the White House seen its share of white powdered something. Darnell is writing, there is one Reddit account and one X account talking about Kirk attending that university. I think it's called the University Valley of Utah or something like that. The following day, they were posted the 9th. One X account talking about Kirk attending UVU the following day. Okay. I don't know what to make of that, Darnell. And then I've got Bean Water Productions writing, just tuned in. Israel killed him, right? That'll be a popular one. And if I'm part of Hamas, and if I'm part of the, the Palestinian side, that's going to be a propaganda piece that I'm going to promote. That it was Israel, because Israel is behind everything bad that happens in the world. And it's a familiar trope. The protocols of the elders of Zion that I just happened to find, that I wrote myself, but don't tell anyone. That kind of stuff. And anyway, it's kind of the amount of, I don't personally use the term anti-Semitism because I don't like the term. It's not a well-defined term. I use the term Jew hatred, a hatred of Jews and all things Jewish. And that is pervasive right now in the world. So where was I? I'm trying to catch up on the messages. Whale is writing symptoms of anthrax, which I mentioned much earlier, the letters that were being mailed into the Congress as they were considering or debating and passing the Patriot Act. He's saying symptoms of anthrax are flu-like, like the Spanish flu times during WW1 when horse meat was eaten by city folks. Okay. That's going back, now we're going back 24 years to 9/11 when those letters went out. But I do seem to recall, or I do recall, at least two people dying from those anthrax-laced letters that were being sent to Congress. And yes, he's receiving the U.S. presidential medal. Danny's writing that Trump is going to posthumously award Charlie a medal. I think it's the Presidential Medal of some description. And that I saw that being announced as well. And then Eat Me, in terms of my Latin, that Latin expression that means when you're trying to figure out, a conspiracy, or when there are a lot of questions, the question, who benefits, who ultimately benefits? And I believe Eat Me is giving me the proper Latin term, qui bono, who benefits. I don't speak Latin. Je parle français comme Nancy. Je suis bilingue anglais-français, but Latin, I don't. I know caveat emptor, buyer beware. I know habeas corpus. A few basic terms. Carpe diem, seize the day, but I don't know much Latin. I couldn't conjugate a Latin verb to save my life. Darnell is writing to Bean Water to copy and paste the last link I sent. And then Darnell Pistachio goes on to write, like Israel doesn't have enough going on their own soil, they need to worry about a YouTuber. but people are going to accuse them anyway, because any port in a storm, anything that, like I say, hatred of Jews and all things Jewish, and you don't get anything more Jewish than the nation state of Israel. It is a Jewish nation state. And they've been trying to wipe them out since they were created. I mean, 1948, May 14th, they declared independence. May 15th, five armies invaded to take over what had been the British Mandate. Jordan did capture some. Talk about this a lot. Jordan did grab some. Egypt did grab some, and the Jewish Palestinians were able to grab some as well. And then after a war that went from May until March of the following year, after that war ended, there were armistice agreements signed. Jordan got part of the old British Mandate. Egypt got a piece, and the Jewish Palestinians got a piece. And there was peace, and they called the borders the Green Line borders. All right, here are the borders. We got there. And then, but the Arab world, the Islamic world, viewed that war, they called that war the Nakba. It was a humiliation. It was a catastrophe and a humiliation to the Arab world when a few 100,000 Jewish Palestinians were able to defeat the combined forces of 5 invading Arab League armies. They were humiliated. And then in 1967, they got humiliated again, another Nakba. And, Egypt, in alliance with Jordan and Syria, tried to do what they couldn't do back in 1948, and they lost territory. Egypt lost control of the Gaza Strip that they had, captured after that first war. Jordan lost control of Judea Samaria, the western bank of the Jordan River. They lost control of it. And Syria lost control of the Golan Heights, and they were humiliated. So in 1973, they launched a surprise attack to try and wipe Israel off the map again. They keep trying over and over to wipe Israel off the map, and they keep failing. You'd think they'd stop. But after that 1973 failure, Nakba, catastrophe, humiliation, after that one, things did settle down. And then it became intifada, 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 uprising, uprising, uprising. And the Palestinian identity basically was born. They took the flag that the Arabian Hashemites had fought under. The Palestinian flag that you see is actually a flag that the Arabs used when they were fighting against the Ottoman Turks. That was their flag. Jordan also adopted that flag, but they stuck a star in the triangle. And they said, okay, we're going to adopt the flag, that Arabian Peninsula flag that we fought under when we were fighting against the Ottoman Turks. We're going to take that flag, but we'll add a star to it. And the people of Judea Samaria, the Arabians of Judea Samaria, and the Arabians and Egyptians from the Gaza Strip, they went back to that original Arabian flag. Anyway, let me read what's being written. Eat Me is writing, Clayton Morris, ex of Fox and Friends, now has his new show with his wife, Natalie, called Redacted. Okay, I was watching, you sent me a video with that gentleman, Clayton Morris. I didn't know his name. If you had said Redacted, I would have known automatically. And so I know that Clayton Morris, at least from what I've gleaned, he believes it's a genocide. So everything he says is I find him to be incredibly anti-Israel. And the propaganda coming from the Gaza Strip, that's truth. And the propaganda coming from Israel, that's all lies. And, he's got a bias. And I guess you can say I have one too. I do have a pro-Israel bias. I don't consider it a blind bias. I think Netanyahu, was he guilty of corruption prior, accepting gifts, bribes, and things of that nature, to interested parties who are buying his influence. Do I think that happened? I don't know empirically if it happened, but I do think the charges against him warrant a trial, that he should be, forced to defend himself in a court of law. And the war that's going on right now is incredibly politically convenient for Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi. Anyway, but does that mean that everything Benjamin Netanyahu, this is the difficulty. We get into a polarized world where someone's either 100% good or 100% evil. So Benjamin Netanyahu, 100% evil in a lot of minds. And I use this word a lot, I compartmentalize. I say, okay, this part of what Benjamin Netanyahu says, I agree with. This part, I don't. And part of this is my Christian perspective. If I look at myself honestly in the mirror, I'm going to recognize that I'm a broken, fallen, sinful, horrible creature. But does that mean I never get anything right? I'm wrong all the time? I do some good things. Benjamin Netanyahu does some, Joe Biden, Justin Trudeau. Even though broadly speaking, I disagree with them, I will compartmentalize, criticize specific policies, positions, opinions, ideas. I'll criticize those. But I'm broken, fallen, sinful, horrible. The only thing that's going to reconcile me, because we're all going to our maker, Charlie Kirk he's gone home. And the only thing that will save Charlie Kirk is not his stance on trans or his stance on Israel or his stance on any other political issue. When he comes to judgment, it's not a question of, well, where did you stand on the doctrine of salvation by faith alone? What is your stance on Israel? What is your stance on gender confused individuals? It's got nothing to do with it. The only thing that saves Charlie Kirk's eternal soul from separation from God is the blood of Jesus Christ on that cross. It's the only thing that saves him, because he's broken and he was a broken, sinful, fallen man, just like me, just like you, just like all of us. Anyway, Danny's writing that he took Latin at private school. Who benefits is qui, spelled Q-C-U-I, bono, pronounced qui bono. Okay, we got a Latin lesson. Very good. Eat Me is saying to believe that Jews or Masons control everything is to have mental laziness. Maybe I'm mentally lazy, but I do believe there is a Masonic network that exists in this world. And when we talk about Club of Rome, when we talk about Bohemian Grove, when we talk about the Bilderbergers, we talk about the World Economic Forum, when we talk about a lot of these, some open, some clandestine organizations. Bilderbergers certainly clandestine. Club of Rome is somewhat clandestine. Bohemian Grove, Coconut Grove, these are somewhat clandestine. I view these as being Masonic organizations and that they are linked. Likewise with Skull and Bones, I consider these Masonic brotherhoods, for lack of a better word, and that they are interconnected. And that if you want to be a prominent individual in today's society or within a specific industry, an important industry, if you want to rise to the top of the pharmaceutical industry, you better have Masonic connections. If you want to be a major media personality in movies, television, streaming shows, or music, well, you better have Masonic connections. You better be willing to bow the knee to powers of this world that you do not want to be bowing the knee to. I think of that famous movie. I don't know how famous it was. It starred Ralph Macchio. I don't know whether it was before or after Karate Kid. I tend to think it's after. called Crossroads. And at the end of the movie, the whole movie is about Willie Brown, this old black harmonica player who sold his soul to the devil for fame and fortune, and he feels like he got ripped off. He never got what he was promised. And so he goes back to the crossroads, and the devil shows up. Legba shows up again a second time. And the character of Daniel, or that Ralph Macchio. Ralph Macchio is playing. They call him Lightning. The character he's playing, he's a guitar player, and old Willie Brown is saying, I didn't get you tear up my contract. I didn't get. He says, I didn't get it. You got everything you were told, and you've got nothing to bargain with. And then he looks over at young Ralph Macchio and he goes, unless. And Ralph Macchio is like, sure, you can have me too. I don't believe in this shit anyway. And I think there are individuals within, oh, sure, I'll sign on. I want to be part of, that hot new boy band. Sure, sign me up. I'll bow the knee to whatever you want. I don't believe in this shit anyway. And they end up involved with something that is incredibly dark. That's my view. If you want to call me crazy, intellectually lazy, if you want to call me whatever, it's okay. We're all entitled to our opinions. Danny is writing, Charlie was not just a YouTuber. He created Turning Point USA, pushing traditional values. It's funny, that video that I was just watching, and while I disagree with this guy, Clayton Morris, with respect to things related to Israel, I don't discount all his views. Again, I compartmentalize. And I think, and the thing he was saying, and I don't think he knew he was doing it, but he kept saying the US, or the West maybe, but certainly the US, is at a tipping point. And this is where my fear is, that if this was an orchestrated event, and there have been suggestions. We were talking earlier about the two guys, one in a white shirt, one in a black, one with a white ball cap. And if you watch the videos, you'll notice that there seems to be actions that might be construed as signaling. The guy in the white shirt and white baseball cap touches his cap. And then after touching his cap, you see the guy, and he's off to the left as you're looking at the screen. So he's on the left. And then a guy in black on the right makes a couple motions with his hands. And then almost immediately after, the shot rings out. And there had been suggestions, we've all watched baseball before, all the signs that are made by managers in third base and dugout, third base coach, first base coach, and it's been mocked in all kinds of movies and everything, this signaling. And it's one of these things where, do guys sometimes, if I put on a baseball cap, I got one here. If I put on a baseball cap, might I go like that at some point and touch it? I got all kind of schmutz on this that fell on the ground. But, might I do a little thing like that? Yeah. And does it mean anything? No. I mean, it's that old Freudian line of, sometimes a banana is just a banana. That things don't always have to mean something. So anyway, what I found most striking is that, so you have the guy in the white hat touches his hat. Is that a signal of some kind? Could be, could not be, I don't know. Then the guy in the black shirt kind of does something with his hands. Could be a signal, maybe, who knows? If you're believing this is a conspiracy, you'll tend to think, okay, that was a signal. And then the shot rings out. And there's a suggestion, and the problem is, when you watch the videos now, because of the pervasiveness of deep fakes and AI, if you want to make it appear that something's puffing up, now these two guys, the guy in the white shirt and the guy in the black shirt, I've seen multiple videos from multiple angles, and they're always there. So at least I know they were there. I know that those are not, I'm reasonably convinced they're not CGI AI type generated images that have been superimposed. But But the suggestion is that I've seen is that the guy in the black, that he pulls or tugs on something to basically like a squib to get the blood pouring out. And this is part of the conspiracy that it was staged. I'm not saying it was or it wasn't. I'm not, I'm open to everything. It's like, people talk. I have a few people on the station who come on regular who believe in flat Earth. And I'm not averse to talking about it. And, it's not that important to me. It's not, the shape of the Earth isn't a major concern for me because whether the Earth is flat or round, how does that affect me? How does it affect my views on God and other things or the political situation in the world? Does it change the political situation in the world if we're flat and not round? I don't know. Anyway, so that was an interest. The thing that struck me when I saw the guy in the black immediately after the shot rang out, um, there would be if I heard a loud rifle crack and then I saw someone completely slump over, I don't know how I would react in that moment, but I don't think, but I do not believe I would go, ho hum. I think the crack of the shot would probably have me go jump. And then seeing someone slump, I suspect I might run. I would do something. But in the videos I've seen, the guy in the black certainly seems very, I don't know, laissez, relaxed, much more relaxed than I think I would be. There's a difficult, how would I react? I don't know. And not everyone reacts to situations the exact same way. So that gets difficult. But that's another one that's percolating out there in the internet, on X, on Reddit, on Twitter, on Facebook, probably too. Is this idea that it was a staged event, that Charlie Kirk's alive somewhere, living on an island with, the 9/11 victims who were supposed to be on a plane that some people say was a hologram, and that they're living on an island somewhere. And, you know, and getting back to redacted and this guy that ate me, Clayton Morris, thank you. I can't keep his name in my head. And that the US is on a tipping point, which is, for Charlie Kirk's organization was called Turning Point USA. We're at a turning point. Well, Clayton Morris is referring to it as a tipping point. And I have to worry that, so we have this problem. We have free speech under attack, seemingly. And how are we going to respond? And is the response going to be worse than the problem? Is the cure going to be worse than the disease? In order to promote free speech, are we going to start clamping down on free speech? If someone says that they think, oh, that Jordan Peterson is, spreading lies, garbage, and nonsense. He's a horrible human being. He's a Nazi. And there are people who do express that opinion. They expressed it about Charlie Kirk. They expressed it about guys like Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro or others. And should an individual be able to use that type of language to criticize someone? Because it's already come out when a lot of voices have said that it is the MSNBCs, the Rachel Maddows, these, left-wing commentators who are promoting things by equating the Charlie Kirks, the Jordan Petersons, the Donald Trumps of this world as being Nazis. I hate using that word. I think it hurts the algorithms on here, but that's what stinks about the world we live in. We have to self-censor. We have to, oh, don't use that word, use this word instead. I've said 1930s Germany, but the word is Nazis and it's thrown around all the time now. And so then you get a younger person in their 20s, teens, late teens, and They think they've got the entire world figured out, and they think if I'd been alive in 1930s Germany, I would have been brave enough and I would have taken Adolf out and the world would, and so now I've got, these guys on MSNBC and the Young Turks and others telling me that Trump and these guys that they're the equivalent of that guy who headed up. I've already said it. They're equivalent to Nazis. So the good thing to do now, and so are they going to start clamping down on free speech? And that would be the ultimate irony, because I disagree with those who say that gender is a subjective thing. It's divorced from sex. It's divorced from XXXY. Gender is an outward expression that is based on someone's inner feelings and all this stuff. I disagree with that. But would I want to live in a world where someone is persecuted or prosecuted for espousing ideas that I disagree with? No, absolutely not. I find it distasteful when someone uses the Nazi label and affixes it helter skelter. But do I want them prosecuted for doing that? No. I will put a little water in my free speech wine. And if someone comes out and advocates and says, you need to XYZ, which ultimately leads to something like we saw in Utah yesterday, and they openly advocate for something of that nature, then yes, okay. Now we have someone specifically calling, but the problem is the slippery slope we're on is that, well, those words can be interpreted by someone, and then they can use those words that aren't specifically telling them to do that, but that's the way they hear it. And that's a slippery slope. And that's when I was listening to Clayton Morris on Redacted. That's what was on my mind when he was talking about we're at a tipping point. And I still think there may be more to come. You remember 9/11 happened. So everyone's trying to process that. And then shortly thereafter, you got these anthrax letters, and I haven't even processed what happened on 9/11, and now there's anthrax. And then shortly thereafter, right around the same time in Baltimore, there was an ex-military veteran who was shooting people randomly in the city of Baltimore. And a lot of people forget this stuff, the same way that a lot of people forget about Building 7, because Building 7 went down in the evening hours, or late afternoon, early evening hours of Monday, September 11th. That's when Building 7 went down. But people had already they were processing the Twin Towers. They were processing Pennsylvania and the hole in the ground. They're processing the supposed plane that hit the Pentagon. They had all this stuff coming at them. Now another building goes down, and you ask people even to this day, you remember Building 7? They're like, what do you mean Building 7? Well, the North and South Tower fell down, and then the third building, 45, 47 stories building in the World Trade Center complex, the Solomon Brothers, or Building Number 7, as it was called, it went down. They're like, I didn't know a third building went down. They didn't know. They couldn't process it. It's just too much happening. And, and then after that, again, you had the anthrax letters, and a lot of people forget about the anthrax letters, and they forget about that Baltimore gunman who was randomly shooting people because they were overwhelmed. And my fear is that in the days to come, weeks to come, as people are trying to process this, is more going to happen. Birth pangs, Matthew 24, which I referenced much earlier. Anyway, I'm going to read up on the messages. I think I've covered everything I wanted to talk about. My fear of attack on free speech, this idea. Now we have an emergency. Was it a created emergency? Was this orchestrated, allowed to happen to create the conditions necessary for a further clampdown? I talked about the whole idea. Could if it's true that, as this Clayton Morris is suggesting, that he heard from someone who heard from Charlie that he was moving away. I get the impression with a lot of people that if they can twist things in any way to make Israel look bad, they will, and they think it's justified. Well, if I was wrong, oh well, but the end justified the means. Uh, and then an Islamic connection because of Charlie Kirk's vociferous support. Everything he's ever said publicly has been, leaving aside, well, I heard someone who knows Charlie, and they said that someone close to that, this third, fourth removed game of telephone. If that's not the case, could it have been an Islamic hit? Anyway, I've covered just about everything. And actually I had one other note. I'm remembering a book that I read. I read up to a point. I read almost all of Dan Brown's books. He's the one who wrote Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, famous for the Da Vinci Code. That's when he kind of blew up. And he wrote a book called Origin. And we're living in the AI world, and this book, Origin, was written about 8 or 9 years ago. And it had an Elon Musk Bill Gates type character who had AI, an AI assistant. What do we have? We have Alexa, we have Siri, we have what do they call it on X, Grok? Well, in this case, it was called Winston. And Winston, the AI tool, was basically behind bringing about an assassination to focus attention on a particular issue. I've got to refresh myself because I haven't read the book for a number of years. And I find it odd that I'm unable to recall the specific details of the book. Generally, I'm pretty good. But in this case, it's fuzzy. And I know I have a copy of the book in the house somewhere. Gonna have to refresh my memory on it. I'll probably just read the wiki page and go through the plot outline. Anyway, let me read this up. Thank you, everyone who has shown up. I'm an hour and a half in, but there are close to 20 people watching. I've got 5 thumbs up. Thank you. That helps the algorithms. I hope you enjoy content like mine. Very raw, very unpolished, no production value. I talk about this a lot. The fact that, there's no strings behind me. I'm not sponsored by anyone. These are just the unvarnished thoughts of 50. Sometimes I call myself 60, but I'm 59. I am in my 60th year. I've crossed that 59. I've been around 59 years, so I'm now in year 60. So you might hear me say 60-year-old, but 59, born 1966, Canadian, former military, left the Canadian Armed Forces in June of 2021. Anti-COVID vaccine stuff and push back against all the COVID nonsense. But if you enjoy this type of content, appreciate you hitting the subscribe button. And as well, I didn't mention it again with everyone who showed up, but if you can tell me where you're chiming in from, I always appreciate it. I know Danny and Eat Me are from Montreal. I know Whale is from out in British Columbia. Anyway, let me read the last few messages. But again, that's the last little advertisement for the channel. If you can help boost my algorithms, I appreciate it. So I read that already. Let's see where I am. I'm going to start with Danny. Danny's saying the end justifies the means. That's the system. And we got a Scotty on the scene, and I didn't see him right. I missed that. Oh, here we go. Scotty on the scene, 14 viewers, and you popped up on my algo. Don't disappoint me. Haha, very good. Good to see you here. The more we get, the more. Anyway, Eat Me is saying hi. Darnell saying hi. And Eat Me is encouraging everyone to hit the thumbs up. And then I've got Noxygen, that's how I'll pronounce it. Would you recommend moving to Canada or staying in the United States? I would ask what state you're in. If you were in Florida, I might move down to you. If you're in California, well, probably doesn't make any difference. And if you are going to move to Canada and you're if you are in the United States and thinking of moving to Canada, I would suggest Alberta. It's the most American of our states. Canada has a lot of issues, but I would recommend my point of view. I spent almost 10 years growing up in the United States. I didn't move back permanently to Canada until I was 12. So I spent 8, 9 years, sorry, roughly 9 or so, almost 10 years as an expatriate Canadian living in New York City, New Jersey, and Portland, Oregon, Beaverton, actually. And uh, the US has its flaws, but so does Canada. So that's a subject for another video. Darnell is writing, Canada is further down the road of tyranny than the United States. And the United States was born out of revolution, born out of pushing back against authority. Canada was born out of conciliatory. Well, let's talk things over. Let's work this out. We have a different ethos than the United States. Just reading up the last few. And then Nancy's writing to Noxygen, stay in the US. Would you care to adopt a Canadian? And Scotty on the scene saying no about something. Anyway, Scotty on the scene lives in Canada. Country is going way worse than America. Amen. You're preaching to the choir here. We are something of the tip of the spear. We're watching an evolutionary process. The world is changing. We're going from, and we hit these inflection points historically. World War One was at one of the names, one of the titles, one of the sobriquets given to World War One was the end of empire. And prior to World War One, the world was divided into the various empires: the Ottoman Empire, British Empire, French. They had the remnant of their empire. The Germans had something of an empire. The Russians certainly had their empire. And the World War One kind of signaled an end to that. It's an end of empire. And that was another, it was called the end of empire. That's what they called the war. They called it the Great War, the war to end all wars, and the end of empire. And now we're looking at another phase that we are in, where we are the goal is to transition us to a new system, a new order. And anyway, what's Whale writing? He's writing, thank you for mentioning alternative cosmology, flat earth. Thank you, no problem. Whale and Danny are both proponents of a geocentric model, as opposed to a heliocentric model. And Danny, I agree 100%, and he puts this on most of my streams, and I'm never going to get pushback from me at all. He's writing, Jesus is the crown. Jesus is king. Good night, y'all. Bonne nuit. Eat me. And Eat Me writes that she misses Texas. She lived down there, just not the oven scorching heat. Brown recluse rattlesnakes or tornadoes. If I was to move to Texas, I would probably be inclined to move to West Texas, maybe San Antonio. And then Trevor, Mr. Pink Harley has shown up. They would never have crucified Christ if they knew what was coming. Well, it was prophesied. They had to. Jesus, the suffering servant, Isaiah 53. It had to happen. It was prophesied. And then Assassin Minor 100. Do you have a list of motives you find likely? You've come on a bit late to the stream, but I think the mainstream narrative is that it's a person who was motivated by a hatred for the opinions that Charlie Kirk was expressing. There's the potential that it was motivated by someone who wanted to silence a strong, vociferous supporter of Israel. And so there's suggestions it could be an Islamic connection. That was the motivation. There are likewise suggestions. Redacted Clayton Morris is claiming to know someone who thinks that Charlie Kirk was going to turn anti-Israel, and so Israel took him down. I find that one crazy. And then The idea that it was orchestrated as a psychological operation to overwhelm the senses so that new draconian measures can be brought in to clamp down on free speech and, increase surveillance on the overall population because we got to keep you safe. All kinds of all kinds of theories are out there. Um, and then just as I get ready to wrap up, a bunch more messages. Uh, And Amy saying that if I ever move back to the US, cooler part of the Bible Belt. I don't know if there's a cool part of the Bible Belt. The buckle of the Bible Belt is Drayton. I can't remember the name. It's in Tennessee. And that to me is the buckle on the Bible Belt. That's where they had the Scopes monkey trial back in the 1920s or 30s. William Jennings Bryant, former presidential candidate, and Clarence Garrow, a very liberal lawyer. And they had a battle over Tennessee had a law on the books that made it a crime to teach evolution in the classroom. And so it was kind of a test case. Uh, Scotty's writing Sheen, I need to use my okay. Sorry for sharing that. And then Scotty on the Sheen goes on to say, Rogan, we can call it here. This is Charlie Sheen and Rogan. Sheen, actually, there's a couple more things I want to talk about. Uh, that was just a shot. I watched a little bit of Charlie Sheen and Rogan, but not much. Anyway, well, saying goodnight, Gordon. All other. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Hope you come back. If you hit the subscribe button, you help me out. Again, you're not going to get massive production value. It's a laptop with a built-in camera and microphone, the cheap one that most of us get. No strings behind my back, no sponsors, just some annoying little ads that show up in between. So I get a nickel and a dime here and there from the big wigs at YouTube or Google, who owns YouTube. And bare bones, basic, miserable, pathetic, but the opinions are genuine. And if you like them, I always enjoy the engagement. Sometimes I go live on using StreamYard, the free version of their software. I'm cheap, Scottish, and so I can have people come on open mic and we can talk. And anyway, Scotty's opening up a new can of conspiracy because they seem to be talking about stuff before it happened or stuff like that. I'm conspiracied out for tonight, so thank you for watching Act One, a Canadian take on news events. We'll see you all again. God bless. I am a Christian, so I'll close with, I often close my videos with a blessing from the book of Numbers, and the words are these. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. And may the Lord God Almighty, may the creator of all things, may he grant you peace. And I'm here to tell you, if you're emotionally disturbed by everything that happened, Charlie Kirk, I mean, it's shocking video to watch. Go to the pages of Psalms, read the 23rd Psalm. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff comfort me. Look at the 121st Psalm. I look at the television, I see horrific images. I'm worried, I'm scared. From whence will my help come? My help comes from the Lord. Get into relationship. So I'll leave you there. God bless, and we'll talk to you all soon. Good night. And